Hello everyone, this is Outstar and welcome to the next Vampire the Masquerade clan video. Today we're going to talk about the Ministry, formerly known as the followers of Set or Setites. In this episode you're going to learn exactly why they're called this way now and what exactly they are about. Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition introduced some changes to the old followers of Set clan, changes which actually made them my favorite clan of the newest edition, so I really hope I will pay a good tribute to the snacks. Because I really like snacks. Murder spaghettis, butter spaghetti, danger noodles. These guys, yeah. To put it very simply, Ministry is the clan of faith. Now, it doesn't really mean that all ministers are those worshippers of the ancient Egyptian god Set who gather in the cultish environment and pray to their gods, giving them sacrifices of blood and lamps, and blood of lamps, and blood of other things. Not really. Sure, plenty of ministers are part of the real cult of Set, the old school cult of Set, that would do all those bloody rituals and orgies and whatnot. But a lot of the members of the clan nowadays do not actually participate in any old school stuff like that. And they're not really forced to. It's just that their blood is naturally inclined to spread a version of this faith around them. But to explain this to you properly, we need to know what kind of faith it is first. So I think the simplest way to explain who Set is the anti-god. In a lot of the existing religions in the world, we have the god of the sun and then his shadowy version, his evil brother, the traitor who betrayed him and got punished for that, the one who wanted to liberate himself and the others from heaven, from the rules of rights of the good god. Think Lucifer, think Loki, think Satan, think Serpent in the Garden of Eden, and of course Set from the Egyptian mythology, as this is of course the origin of the followers of Set as they were known as formerly. Set is the noble devil. I would say noble in the quotation marks, of course, because there are many different definitions of being noble. Officially, he wants to liberate the mankind from the tyranny of God. Unofficially, this may end up with the humanity landing in hell and in eternal torment for the sins they have committed, but that's less important. What's important is that Ministry nowadays rebranded themselves with this new name. As the people behind the rebranding say, it's because they are not following Set anymore. Set lives inside of them. Every minister carries Set in their hearts, being the blessed children of the anti-god. Whether they actually believe in Set or not, they spread his faith around in the form of liberation, which very often actually means corruption. Let me quote a passage from the book. "Every man and woman is a star, a god trapped in mortal flesh. We are not lesser than him, and we don't need his tyrannical law," spoke Set to his disciples, 12 in number. "We will slay Osiris and claim godhood for ourselves." This is the ultimate core of the minister's beliefs, and even if they do not actually participate in this whole religion, cult, or however you would call it, the blood inside of them, the curse that they carry, pushes them into the way of corruption, or actually liberation, sorry. They do not use the word corruption officially, of course, the same way as they do not use the word Setites anymore. They wince when they are called this way. Because, let's be honest, ministers are all about that influencing others. And talking about the ancient Egyptian god of evil is not exactly the best way to get to people nowadays. Modern ministers are way more inclined to use the word ministry of love, or maybe coaching methods, maybe the psychological methods that therapists use, or the methods that the cult leaders use to sway their little lumps. This works much better than saying, "Hello, I am the servant of the god of deception, and I'm going to make you believe in totally other things that you believe in right now." Imagine a secluded village somewhere in the middle of nowhere, filled with very conservative religious people, living in the same kind of a society for ages. Their convictions, their way of living, not changing for decades or maybe even centuries. This extreme example of a confined society that lives in its own bubble and feels comfortable within it. But then there's this beautiful foreign woman who moves in. Out of the blue, she buys a house in the area. And she starts to get to know people around. And as much as they're at first very uneasy about her presence and they open to her very slowly, she has her ways. She has that subterfuge, that charm to her that sways people into believing that she has their best interest in mind. Sooner or later, the village is starting to change. The things that the villagers believed in originally start to crumble as the influence of the woman changes this place to a completely different one. Another example would be a preacher, a priest, who has a crisis of faith himself. And as much as he still does the Sunday sermon, he specifically uses the wording that makes the believers question their faith. And despite, from the outside, doing a proper job, he causes the erosion from within, the erosion of belief and the erosion of the church. These two examples, I think, explain very well what ministers can be about. They are about this inner erosion, about infiltrating existing societies, infiltrating people's dreams, convictions, and moral codes, and breaking them in subtle ways. They're not very obvious about that. Good minister is going to make them believe that they came up with that idea themselves. So as much as we might be inclined to think of ministers as purely evil, there's only a way here to play ministers with good convictions, or at least acceptable ones. Sometimes they may be the liberators who free people from the chains of their old and stale opinions, for example. Think people who watch my channel and really hated the 5th edition of Vampire before they started watching me. I'm just saying, I might be a minister. This clan usually embraces from one of the two groups. The group number 1 would be a very general group of liars, deceivers, criminals, con artists, corrupted gurus, those who are able to run from the law for ages using fake identities. These people usually find their place in the ministry clan. But then on the other hand, you also have those who question the reality and the existing beliefs, such as raging atheists or philosophy students. Those who study the reality and want to change people's mindsets, knowing, getting to the bottom of it, and realizing that a lot of this religious nonsense doesn't make sense. A lot of the things that people were inclined to believe for centuries is just not true. You know, the poor Polish guy Copernicus who tried to convince everyone around him that it's not that the Earth is the center of the universe. No, Earth is moving around the sun, alright? He would probably be a good candidate for the clan ministry. I'm sure some snacks had him on the radar. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions is that ministry are looking for these people to corrupt them. That's not true. They're looking for those who can handle corruption, who can handle the corruption of others especially. Or, of course, liberation. That's the official name. And as much as some other ministers may have good intentions, let's put it this way, they are usually masters of temptation, preying on the desperate people, those who fear death, those who have the overwhelming need to belong somewhere, to some kind of a congregation, for example. Those people are taken under ministers' wings and very often used as herds. They blend in the human society as pimps, as club owners, as coaches, therapists. As long as their nightly schedule is allowing so, they are trying to be the closest possible to the human society. I would actually assume that they would try to compete with Toreadors on that matter, especially as they both own the discipline presence. And they very rarely exist without the following, some kind of a following of humans. Now, this following and the network that they have around themselves is much less bureaucratic and formal than, let's say, Ventrus or La Sombras. It's much more personal. It's being in touch with them on the emotional level. As much as Toreadors may attract people to themselves as these beautiful butterflies, as these extremely enticing creatures that people just want to cling to, ministers would be more the ones that listen. The good friend that you can convey your secrets to. The person that you look up to because they always serve you with a good advice. They don't have to be beautiful, they don't have to be sexually enticing, as Toreadors often are. I know this one awesome minister character, which was played by one of the players in the Discord campaign, and she was actually an old grandma that always smelled of cookies and cake. And she had this very warm smile with wrinkles all over her face, and yep, she was a minister. She was a hardcore set believer. And with her very warm demeanor, with sitting on the bench next to you when you were feeling lonely and sad, she was trying to make you feel happier and liberate you from your convictions and make you eventually probably lose your humanity because you committed horrible, horrible sins. Great character, I loved her. They have a very solid position in the vampiric society as this clan of faith. But their other side is also that they have a very, even more solid position as the traders of goods of all kinds, mostly very shady. The circulatory network, human trafficking, drugs, weapons, ministers can get it all. They have their ways, they have their contacts. They are not afraid of making their hands dirty, which creates this very weird double-sided face of ministers in the vampiric society. On one hand, the clan of faith, on the other, the clan of sin. How they explain this? Well, they say that they're actually martyrs. They do that so others don't have to do this. And this makes them actually extremely useful. That's why probably they still survived, despite other kindreds really distrusting them and in general being very cautious around the ministers. They thrive. They always find a person to make the deal with. But what is exactly their faction? Where do they belong in the general political spectrum of kindred? Ministers originally walked out of the conversations which started the Camarilla and didn't join it as a clan at its beginnings. That doesn't mean that they weren't working for the Camarilla clans throughout the ages, but they remained independent. They were doing business with anyone who had the resources to do business with them, of course. But being independent is not as welcoming in the modern times. In the era of beckoning, in the era of Second Inquisition, it's good to have friends out there. And the ministers are not stupid. They know that they cannot really survive that long being alone. So the first thought of ministers as a clan was to actually talk again with the Camarilla and find a way to get themselves inside the faction. There was a conversation, a meeting with the representatives of Camarilla. A meeting during which some papers were signed, some plans were made. But let's say that the meeting has exploded. There was a terrorist attack in the hotel where the meeting took place. But still the papers were signed, so ministers weren't immediately going to anarchs and calling them, please get us in. No, they waited for a call. They waited for some prominent Ventru to let them know, okay guys, we still send the papers, you guys are welcomed in. But when the call happened, it turned out that the situation has changed dramatically. Ministers were no longer invited to be in the Camarilla. No, they were absolutely shunned away from it. And instead of them, the clan Banu Hakim, formerly known as the Assamites, was invited to the faction. You may believe many theories. A lot of kindred believe the theory that it is Banu Hakim who stood behind the terrorist attack. Let me know what are your theories on that matter. Anyway, after the negotiations failed, ministers joined the Anarch faction. They do not believe themselves to be purely Anarch, but they do need some friends. They do need some partners in crime. And Anarchs just seems to be a good place for them to operate nowadays. They offer a lot of opportunities, especially to grow. As Camarilla was traditionally ruled by the elders, now slowly swayed by the power of beckoning and torn from their cities, leaving a lot of the cities free to be conquered by anarchs. I believe ministers are in a pretty good spot. Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition core book introduces some very interesting archetypes of humans who could be embraced into the clan ministry. Now, these archetypes are of course limited, you can come up with any minister you feel like, but they are there to give you a general gist of who you may create as the ministry clan member. The first one is Faith Healer, and Faith Healers during their lifetime used the faith to heal people around them. They were evangelists, therapists, maybe witches living somewhere in seclusion and trying to heal people with their pagan beliefs in the modern age. But now it's connected more to kindred. They try to heal kindred from the chains of their beasts. Then you have the lifetime fraud. So you have people who during their lifetime were walking and talking frauds and lies. Con artists who never use their real name and real identity. The shady guys who walk from one city to the other with only a single suitcase. Then you have conspiracy debunkers. Imagine a person who tries to go to all those closed flat earthers or anti-vaccine groups on Facebook and throws very hard data or very difficult questions to answer for these people, trying to debunk their theories and trying to make their beliefs crash. It's a very ministry thing to do, and they would obviously fit in the clan. Then we also have the Mouth of the Gods, a person who during their lifetime heard the voice of the god, was a medium. We're not talking here about the Malkavian archetype of person who was mentally unstable and was shunned from society for claiming that they can hear God. No, we're talking about people who thrived after they shared this. They became the local prophets. They became the sect leaders or preachers or the renowned priests. We talk about successful people who do that, and these ones are also very good archetype for clan ministry. And last but not least, entrepreneurial archaeologist, which is a very interesting archetype. I feel it's connected with the roots of ministers in ancient Egypt. And the fact that, well, when we think archaeologists, we very often think ancient Egypt and people working there. So the entrepreneurial archaeologist is one of the rare people of their profession who actually earns money. It's a person who retrieves either the fossils or ancient relics. And instead of donating them to the museums, they do donate some they keep for themselves as collectors, and the other they're selling on the black market. Again, a very ministry thing to do. Ministers have 3 native disciplines for themselves, and that is obfuscate, the illusion of invisibility or illusion of becoming someone else, used by ministers to blend in their environment and infiltrate societies or people, try to decipher their dreams and goals, try to get to the bottom of what exactly would tempt them. Presence, which they very often use in a more subtle form than toreadors would, trying to subtly infuse the way they speak, their monologues, their speeches, their sermons. And last but not least, protean, called by some of the ministers serpentis. And it does allow the ministers to, for example, change into a snake. It's not like all of them have to know how to do that. They can also pick another animal if they want to. Their access to the discipline protean is the same as it would be for any gangrel, for example. They use it to either induce awe in people when they change their features to look more snake-like, or protean is also used by them to escape harm. Protean does allow them to get away from trouble without getting harmed too much. Their curse is very similar to how it was in the older editions. Ministers hate the lights. Direct illumination, either from a natural source or from a light bulb or anything like that, makes them recoil. And they do receive more damage from the sun as well. While their compulsion, so something which is getting triggered once the beast takes over, that would be transgression. And what it means is that ministers become enablers of others' bad deeds. They are going to receive minuses to their dice as long as they do not cause someone around them or themselves to get a stain. And that would be because they broke their conviction or a chronicle tenet. It is very often a transgression towards the convictions like don't hurt the innocent. So it is often about sinning and about doing something abhorrent. But sometimes it might be different, and I encourage you to come up with your own ideas for ministers. Just like we did in the past in the Toreator video, let me know in the comments what would be your idea of a minister. Who would you exactly want to liberate or corrupt? I'm going to give you an example of my minister that I've played in the comments down below. And yeah, that will be it. Thank you so much for listening. That was the video of clan ministry, my favorite clan of V5 so far. Remember, don't get lost in the night, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.